Supervisor. I'd like to welcome you all here and thank you for coming. Hopefully you'll learn a lot tonight and you'll enjoy what's going to happen. This, of course, is an update on the Comprehensive Plan Committee. The last comprehensive plan, or shall I say the first comprehensive plan that the town of Lansing did was in 2006. And the suggestion is that every 5 to 10 years you update your comprehensive plan. So we're kind of on time. We're in between that, so that's good. A comprehensive plan is basically an outline or a plan for your town going forward, looking into the future. It's a plan that's constantly in motion and constantly changing, as you can well imagine. In September of 2012, we put together a comprehensive plan committee under the leadership of John Cantor, who's a planner, planner of the town of Lansing at this point. He's finished up his term with us. But he's been working with the comprehensive plan since September of 2012. And they've been working very hard. Someone just told me that I told them it was only going to be a year. And I don't remember saying that. But anyway, they're still going, they're still working hard, and they're making great progress. At this point, I would like to name the members of the comprehensive plan, and if you stand up, that would be great, or if you want to wave your hand so that people can talk to you in the grocery store or wherever they see you once they know that you're on the committee. First one is Amanda Steinhardt. She's not here? Okay. Jay Space.
Hello?
He's in the back.
Oh, in the back.
He's hiding. Jeremy Dietrich. Larry Beck. Lynn Leopold. I didn't see Lynn. She's in Colorado. Oh, nice.
Lynn is the liaison from the village of Lansing, so it's been great having her.
Yeah. Maureen Cowan. Norm Davidson. He's from our planning board. I don't see Norm here tonight either. Philip Snyder. No Philip. Ruth Hopkins. She's a Lansing town board member. Sarah Thompson. Susan Miller. Susan Tabrizi. And Tom Butler. And I'm going to turn it over to John so he can say a few words, since we have a lot of things to go over tonight and to get through. And again, thank you all for coming.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. It's a good crowd. Good start for what, in effect, is the first official public meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Committee. And there will be many more, hopefully, although my time in the process is winding down. But it's been really enjoyable, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about what the committee has done so far, kind of in the way of a little status report. But first, just a little bit about what is a comprehensive plan and why do we want to update it. I'm sure many of you are familiar with what the plans are, but basically, and in very few words, the comprehensive plan is a document or collection of documents that sets forth goals and recommended actions in order to ensure that a community grows in an orderly, well thought out manner. Pretty simple, but pretty important. And really everything that the town wants to do over the next 10 to 20 years, which is only the time frame of the comprehensive plan. It really comes from you, the residents, and the people who have an interest in what happens in the town. And so, again, that's why it's great to see so many of you out here. The plan is based on the residents' vision of how they would like to see the community development, what types of programs and facilities they would like to see, where they would like land uses to occur, things like that. And so we're going to be talking a lot about those types of things later on today. And it can cover a very wide range of elements. Parks and recreation facilities, there will be a group talking about those, transportation, housing, population and demographic trends, the economy, very important, of course, community facilities and infrastructure. All those things really are components of the comprehensive plan and an update. But getting more basic even, why prepare a comprehensive plan or an updated one in the first place? And there are any number of reasons, but some of the real basic highlights are really to prepare the town for the future and to help the town make good choices, make the right choices. Again, to establish a community vision. What really does the town want to see happen? To encourage economic stability and a good tax base. All those things are important. To protect significant environmental and natural resources. Of course, we want to do that. To coordinate with other governments and other regional groups. And really, probably one of the most important is to provide a good, sound legal basis and foundation for all of the different regulations and laws that the town wants to adopt. Things like subdivision regulations, site plan review, zoning, and all those important tools that the town has. And then another good one that some people don't really think about that much is it provides a really good basis for the town to obtain grants and financial assistance for different things that it wants to do. Things like trail building and other community facilities. So probably spent more time on that than I needed to, but it's important to probably be a good thing to start with. So just a real quick update on what has happened so far with this plan update. Again, Kathy mentioned that the committee first met in September of 2012. So it sounds like it's been a while, but really the committee spent the first 3 or 4 months kind of organizing, figuring out where it's going to go, what it's going to do. It reviewed the 2006 plan, which I think the committee found was a very good start. It was a good plan, but perhaps not as specific as it could be. And so that's one of the things I think that the committee is really trying to focus on, is trying to get more specific, more focused, and come up with some more doable, workable recommendations. So the committee identified key issues that are going on in the town since 2006. They conducted a resident survey. It was a random sample survey, which Susan will tell you about a little bit more in a minute. In fact, a lot more about that. The committee has started and has made good progress on reviewing goals and objectives from the 2006 plan. And we will be having 4 breakout sessions for some more focused discussions on those. And so we'll tell you a little bit more about those in a second. We've been doing a lot of data collection and analysis. We did a demographic update of the town, in part based on the 2010 census information that's available. And things like that will be or are on the town's website for you to look at. We're not going to get into that tonight because there's a lot of information. So we think that's enough for now. Just wanted to mention we will have 4 breakout groups, and after Susan does this presentation on the survey and the findings of the survey, I'll tell you just a little bit more about how we're going to do the breakout groups. So I think with that, we get going with the survey presentation, and I'll turn it over to Susan, who has done a great job of helping the committee out with the survey preparation, the whole process of it. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure will. Thank you, John, very much. Good evening, everyone. As John said, my name is Susan Tabrisi. I am Associate Professor of Political Science at Wells College, just a little bit up the lake from here. And my specialty is American politics. My training is in survey methodology and statistical analysis. Now, all that is important because it gave me the tools to be able to help with the comprehensive plan update process. But the most important thing for you to know about me is that I'm a Lansing resident. And I am invested in the town, as are all of the members of our committee, volunteers, except for John, who are working hard to update a very solid plan from 2006. And part of our update is very important to us, is to get feedback from the community. This is one way of getting feedback from the community, but I'm sure as you look around, you see some of your friends and neighbors who aren't here. And one of the other ways that we can get information from people who don't come to meetings, who may not be as vocal or may not be confident in speaking with their friends and neighbors about these issues, is a random sample survey. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that methodology and then get into some of the details of what we found with our survey. So the comprehensive plan survey goals. Why survey the community? As I suggested to you, we are a volunteer committee. And as volunteers, we are very interested in making sure that the work that we do is not only useful to our community, but is actually used. And along those lines, we wanted to make sure that then the findings that we have, the plans that we put in place, are based on what our community wants. Again, one of the ways to figure out what our community wants and needs is to ask. And a survey is one methodology for being able to do that. We also wanted to ensure that the input that we receive is representative of the entire community. A random sample telephone survey has the advantage of being able to contact people who might not come forward and contact us. We call them, they don't call us in that kind of way. We contracted with the Survey Research Center, Survey Research Institute at Cornell University, a professional survey outfit, who provided us with a random sample of Lansing residents. You'll see throughout the presentation approximately 360 plus or minus people who were selected by their telephone number, a random process, and given the opportunity to answer questions for us. Now, why use a random survey? Nobody called me. I can tell you, no one did call me. I wrote the survey, and nobody bothered to ask me how I felt about any of the questions. The reason why, for many of you, in fact, maybe most of you in the room, didn't get a telephone call is because this is a random process. And when we have 7,500 plus residents, and we're taking 350, 360 out of that, the probability that you will be called is very small. Now, we know from statistical theory and statistical inference that we can take a sample that is randomly selected and make inferences to the population. I can talk about the statistics behind that in more detail. If you're interested in that, I can see by the looks I'm looking at many of your faces as my students give me, no, let's just move on to the meat of it. But I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that what we're doing here is not voodoo. This is not magic. This is tried and true survey methodology that actually comes out of agriculture, and we can talk about that in more detail. One of the things that I also wanted to note for you guys is that as the Survey Research Institute was in the process of selecting individuals to participate, they did do some screening. And one of the screening questions that they asked people was their age. And there are some of us in the room who may have been called and think for answering the telephone, but told, we can't include you in the survey, you don't meet our age range. And for most of us, that was because people were older than the group that we were looking for. Now, why is that? Is that because we don't care what older people think? No, in fact, we're very interested in what older people think. The thing is, when we have a random sample telephone survey like this, we know from research that older people are more likely to answer the telephone. Not only are older people more likely to answer the telephone, they're more likely to actually talk with us, right, than younger people. So the selection of participants based on age was not to minimize the number of older people, but was in fact to maximize the number of younger people, right? And to try to seek out those younger people so that we didn't overrepresent older people in the survey. As you have seen from the demographic update, our population, like everywhere else in the country, is older and getting older than younger. So for that reason, we did select people based on age once we had already reached the threshold that selected us in terms of the number of people of a particular age group that had already been included. So it wasn't you and it wasn't me. It's random probability. I'll ask you also to pay attention to the small print at the bottom of the slides that I'm going to present to you. That will provide you with what we call a margin of error. Now, what's a margin of error? Remember I said that we're taking a sample, which is a smaller selection, and making inference to the population. When we do that, We do it based on probabilistic theory, and what that means is that we're not going to get the exact number from the sample that we would see in the population. We're going to get an estimate. That estimate has parameters on the low end and on the high end. And any survey that you see in the news, and I always jump up and down with my students about Anderson Cooper with this, when they tell you 52% said one thing and 48% said something else, that's what the survey sample says, but you have to look at that margin of error. If the margin of error overlaps, there's no statistical difference. Every result that I'm going to show you today, the margin of error doesn't overlap and there is a statistical difference. What's the bottom line? The bottom line is that we're following survey, practice, tried and true in the industry, and that what we are finding is information that we feel confident basing our comprehensive plan on, and we're looking forward to getting more information from you tonight in the breakout rooms as you provide your interpretations. So, the survey topics. As John mentioned, the comprehensive plan update is meant to look at topics that are future-oriented, and not next week or next month future-oriented, but really long-term future-oriented. And so, as a committee, we decided on several topics to include in our survey. Why people live in Lansing, and their overall satisfaction with living in Lansing. As John mentioned, the town center is part of the 2006 comprehensive plan, and so we wanted to know a little bit more about that. What are people really interested in seeing in the town center? We asked about public investment in things like bike paths, transportation options, lakeside, commercial development. We were also interested in looking at other types of development, residential development, commercial development. As you know, natural gas development is also quite controversial, and it's an issue that we're very concerned about in the town, so we asked about that. We asked about how can we use our land resources, both in terms of agriculture, natural areas, and historical sites. And we were interested in environmental sustainability and practices that people want to see the town engaging in as we're going forward. Finally, we did ask a couple of questions about town governance, and I will refer to those at the end of the presentation. So first, why live in Lansing? We asked people to give us their top reasons for why they live in the town of Lansing. As you can see, public school quality gathered the most responses, but there are a variety of other responses that people were interested in as well. Most importantly, in terms of numbers, both the rural nature of the town itself, and you'll see later that people are very interested in preserving that rural nature of the town, and the roots that people have. Right? So these are important. People are invested in the community, and they're invested in the schools and the rural nature. There are many other categories that we allow people to select, and I'm happy to talk about those a little bit more in the Q&A at the end. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so I'll pull questions into the end. We asked people how satisfied they are with living in Lansing. And not surprisingly, but again, you have to ask the question, you can't just make assumptions. People are pleased with living in Lansing. From a comprehensive plan update committee's perspective, we weren't surprised to find this result, but it's the type of result that we're very interested in promoting and preserving. We want to make sure that the plans that we're putting into place, right, are the types of plans that are going to make sure that in 5 years, 10 years, when we ask people this question, we get an even more enthusiastic response with regard to their satisfaction with living in Lansing. We also asked people the likelihood of living in Lansing in 5 years or so. Right? This is a way of trying to see, are people, even if they're happy here, able to envision themselves being able to stay in town. And as you can see, most people are pretty likely to stay, which again, from a comprehensive planning update committee perspective, suggests that we have people who are invested in the long term in being here. All good news. mentioned, the town center is already a part of the 2006 comprehensive plan, and moving forward, as the comprehensive planning update committee is considering what the town center looks like, we thought, well, let's see what people are preferring in terms of the types of development that might happen in a town center. You'll see that people are interested in shopping, they're interested in services, and they're interested in residential options. It's important to know, however, that the type of shopping that people are interested in are locally owned shops, right? Not looking for the big box store. We don't need another Target, we don't need another BJ's. Not saying anything against those types of establishments, but that perhaps we already have them, and what people are thinking about when they're thinking about a town center are more locally owned establishments. Services include things like a dentist's office, doctor office, and other types of services, business services, that you might find in a town center in a village, for example. And residential options, right? People want to live close to these services, close to this shopping, and we know that if people live close, there'll be more economic support for this type of development. So the national stores lost out. People weren't too excited about those. Of course, development, right, in any form often comes with a price tag, and that price tag is associated with taxes. Right? We asked people specifically how they would feel about their tax dollars, in whole or in part, some aspect of their tax dollars being spent on different initiatives. We first started asking about issues of road safety. For example, having sidewalks to connect a town center or to connect neighborhoods. And 58% of people said sidewalks are a good idea. Right? We also asked about traffic calming measures. What does that mean? Right? Giving people yoga while they're driving? No, this is like roundabout, speed bump, something to slow traffic, maybe a traffic signal, something of that sort. And again, 58% suggested they see an interest in the town engaging in that type of expenditure for traffic safety. We also talked about transportation in other ways associated also with recreation, right? The extent to which people would support, again, the use of tax dollars in part to promote initiatives such as bike paths or lanes on the road that are designated specifically for that type of transportation. 69% saying yes. The development of biking, hiking, and walking trails, not necessarily on the roads, but as you will hear if you are part of the breakout group talking about parks, paths, and recreation, connecting schools and neighborhoods, trails, more nature trails. People very supportive of that, 64%, if you do the rounding up. And we also asked about a practice in which new developments would be asked to include in their site plans opportunities for paths, for parks, to preserve green spaces. And people think that that's a pretty good idea as well. One of the issues that the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee was interested in looking at was the extent to which we're connected to the communities that we want to be connected to, and in particular for our elderly residents, if our public transportation is up to snuff. And it seems as though from 89.5%, and this is people who agreed or strongly agreed to this suggestion, that we use tax dollars to improve transportation for our elderly neighbors, as well as for our disabled sons and neighbors who live in the community. Of course, tax dollars can be used as incentives as well for other types of development, and one of the issues that we were concerned with finding out about, getting a sense of the community, had to do with lakeside commercial development. Now, this could be anything from improvements at Myers Park to the idea of soliciting commercial development, restaurants, etc., and that would be related to tax dollars in terms of incentives and things like that. We see that many people do think that this is important. It is not a, it is 50% plus seeing the lake as perhaps an opportunity for an economic catalyst, if you will, in town. We see a couple other spots where we have that as well. Let me move quickly on to the idea of residential options. As you know, the town is growing, and we have many different building projects, residence projects that are in the works. We asked our friends and neighbors what type of residential options are they interested in seeing be developed here in Lansing. Senior housing, far and away supported. Bringing seniors who are not current residents of Lansing into the town, as well as providing quality residential options for some of the seniors who live in town now and might take advantage of those options. We also asked about moderate income housing, right? Affordable, but not necessarily low income housing, right? Housing that most of us would be able to afford. And we see that people are interested in seeing the town put some effort toward including and soliciting that type of development. Less, but still more than a majority, supporting multifamily housing. Here we're talking anything from condos to apartments, etc. When you combine that with the results for the town center, we start to see a picture of people wanting to have multiple housing options in the town. In terms of encouraging economic development, this is an issue that is on everybody's mind, right? That is about increasing our tax base, like we've heard this from the local schools recently, and also keeping Lansing a viable and vital community that it is. Almost 86.5% of people are suggesting, tourism is probably something that we should be thinking about. We have resources here, and we have the ability to turn that into something that can become not just an asset to us in terms of the rural nature of our town and how much we all enjoy it, but also helping to keep the town sustained from an economic perspective. People are also supportive of the idea of light industrial enterprises coming into Lansing or further developing in Lansing. Here we're talking about light manufacturing, we're talking about other types of small commercial startups in town. People are not as supportive of adding to the heavy industrial base that we already have. It is such an important part of what we do here in Lansing. Here I'm talking, of course, about Warner, and I'm talking about Cargill in particular. This result does not suggest that people don't like those industries, so I want to caution anybody against taking that way. It just suggests that perhaps we have enough of that, now we don't need further development along that road. Okay, so we can't take it as a negative against what we have, but just perhaps we don't need more, and we should instead be focusing our efforts toward light industrial development to have jobs here in town and tourism. Big controversial issue in politics, not only in Lansing, but nationwide, is the question of hydrofracking. As you know, the town currently, I believe, still has a moratorium in place. Is that right, Kathy? Yes. Yes. And one of the things that we wanted to ask about was how people are perceiving this idea of hydrofracking, hydraulic fracturing, and we wanted to make sure that when we asked the question, that we were not somehow leading people into an answer based on the way we asked the question. So in this part of the survey, we actually embedded an experiment. We asked a question about hydraulic fracturing from using two different phrases. Yes. right? Two different ways of thinking about fracturing, hydraulic fracturing, that are in the news and that people would be familiar with. The term hydrofracking is so ubiquitous in the news and has taken on a negative connotation in such a way that we didn't want to just ask about hydrofracking and say, well, everybody hates hydrofracking, right? Without asking about it another way to see if, in fact, what we're getting at is a real perspective from our residents. When we do ask about hydrofracking, you'll see that people believe that we should strongly discourage or discourage the practice here in Lansing. This is overwhelming. And as you'll see, the margin of error is larger here because the population, the sample that we're dealing with is smaller. Again, we split the sample in half. Now, what is interesting is that when we ask the question another way, we ask people about shale, oil, or gas development, right, which is less loaded in the current political debate and in the media debate, we still find that people are not supportive of this practice here in Lansing. And as John was talking about in terms of the importance of your comprehensive plan, this is important for us because when we talk about the wants and desires of the community in our comprehensive plan, we are providing not only a foundation for future Lansing residents in terms of giving them an idea of where the community stands, but we're also signaling to outside entities what are the wishes and the desires of the community on this issue. We're also interested in land use issues, right? Again, one of the most important reasons why people said that they live in the town of Lansing is because of the rural nature of the town. If you look at this result, where we asked people how important was it for the town to take action in protecting agricultural land, scenic and natural areas that we have here in the town, and very important historical sites. Overwhelmingly, people are invested in this type of action by the town, right? To protect the agricultural land that we have that is so important not only economically but culturally to the town. Scenic and natural areas, which include the lake but are not exclusive to the lake. As many of you know, there are many beautiful areas in Lansing and natural areas that we want to preserve. And historical sites, right? In preserving the heritage of the town and in making sure that those historical sites don't get overwhelmed by any development that may happen in the future. As the town likely will grow, we asked people as well how they would like to see development proceed with regard to environmental and sustainability practices that are being discussed in the wider debate. We asked how important it was for the town to be mindful of issues such as runoff and erosion control. And I'll tell you that I was a bit surprised by this because I didn't think that people would be passionate or interested in soil and erosion, runoff and erosion control. Not something that, you know, when you stop at the gas station and people will come up to you and say, hey, did you hear about the soil and the erosion control? But in fact, people see this as very important, right? It suggests to me that people in the town are interested in preserving our environment such that our growth happens thoughtfully. Right? Soil and erosion concern. The encouraging of new buildings and even older buildings to be more energy efficient and to follow efficient building practices. Right? And the development of renewable energy sources here in town. Right? The idea of using the resources that we have and pursuing it, seeing where that might go. Again, this is not a specific question that says, do you want a windmill on your land? It's not that at all. Instead, it says, is this something that the town should be cognizant of? Is this something that we should have on our radar as we are developing, as we are growing? We asked as well about local government. And this is a glass half empty, glass half full type of interpretation, I'll tell you. We asked how people felt about local government in asking whether or not the government was responsive to resident concerns. Not too bad, right? Good and excellent in the minority, but then when I started to talk to town board members and other officials in town, I realized that that share ain't so bad, right? Because much of what they hear is complaint, right? And so when someone says, hey, yeah, you're kind of doing all right, that's not so bad. So I think this is one that I'll ask you to interpret on your own in my diplomatic way. Okay. And then in terms of communicating information, you're here at a public meeting. You've taken your time to come here to listen, to be participant in a conversation that we're going to have afterwards. That's a great cost, right? And most of us have busy lives and a lot of things going on, and we don't have the ability to put that cost in, right? So when we interpret a question like this, it also has to do with the extent to which people are coming to get information. But it's information that I wanted you to see, because we also ask people how they would like to get their information. And as you can see, there are a variety of ways that people want to hear from our town board, right? Good old-fashioned mail, which is expensive. Right? Email, which not everybody uses, right? And isn't always as effective, but is kind of the new way of doing things. A town newsletter, a website, social media, but look at meeting attendance, right? Congratulate yourselves, you are in the extreme minority. But I say that in all seriousness, because the cost that you have incurred in coming today to listen and to participate is important, and it's critically important for Lansing. But it's not something that everybody can do. So our conclusions. Overall, people are satisfied. They're happy being here in Lansing. The Comprehensive Plan Update Committee is very interested in maintaining that and augmenting that to the best of our ability, making sure that what we're planning for the future is the type of community that people want to stay in, and more people maybe even want to come and live in. The Comprehensive Plan Survey provides us with an indication of the types of things that people are interested in seeing us focus our efforts on as an update committee, and it underscores the importance of the Comprehensive Plan. People are invested. Even if they can't come to this meeting, people are interested, they want to know what's happening in the town, and they want to see the town move forward in a planned manner with some of their priorities in mind. I thank you so much for your attention and for your participation in the meeting tonight. Will we take questions now, or will we wait till later?
Yeah, so I think we planned on